Hey, we're back.
Good to see you, man.
Another episode. It's been a few months. It's good to be back. And yeah, like, subscribe, share, all those things.
Yeah, I don't know
Um,
where all of our graphics are, but I guess we can go without our names. Everybody knows I'm Kevin. This is Matt over
Matt,
here.
yeah, good to be here. We, I guess, both are in somewhat of a transition, so we're trying to figure out a new rhythm, routines for this, but a lot to talk about. I was unfortunately listening to Josh Howerton today to prepare for this a little bit because I want to see what they're saying. And oh
Unfortunately,
my
is a great
gosh,
word. Sadly for Josh Howerton. Yeah.
I I got content for days from that one podcast. Wow.
Yeah.
Um,
So what is Josh Howerton up to these days?
well, his the title of the podcast was about Iran, so I thought it might be relevant for today. We wanted to talk about the coming Armageddon. Of course, he spent a lot of time. Uh, this actually kind of sums up evangelicalism. So they he spent a lot of time bashing homosexuality. He spent some time on James Tallarico because James Tallarico is in his state, and so the only he had like 5 or 6 points of why James Tallarico is like the Antichrist and a false prophet, and they were all connected to him loving the LGBTQ community.
It's a
And
big deal
so
for
I
these
left
guys.
thinking, yeah, I left thinking that you're going to hell if you love the LGBTQ community. And then they had the discussion with an Iranian pastor, who David Nasser. He, he's a familiar name,
Yeah.
but they were talking about how it was right for us and righteous for us to invade Iran, and one of the reasons they gave is because, at least Nasser gave, and Josh agreed with him, was because homosexuals in the LGBTQ community had nowhere to express themselves in Iran, or they got in trouble. And I was like, but I thought, um, as Christians, we weren't supposed to give LGBTQ community space to be loved and express themselves. So the hypocrisy was strong in that podcast.
Yeah,
And also,
you and I were like raised with this idea of situational ethics, and I think our conservative background. I know I heard this. I assume you did as well. That the opposition, anybody who wasn't us, just decided what they believed on the basis of the situation that they were in. So any ethical stance or moral stance or religious stance wasn't in bedrock. It was shifting with whatever the situation at hand was. And I feel like that just that example and every single thing that I see right now out of evangelicalism, out of the church, out of, maybe even conservatism, is situational ethics and situational morals. Whatever the situation is, I'm willing to change what I think or believe in on the basis of whatever is advantageous in the moment to what I want to be true.
yeah, that's a good point. It's like a chameleon. It's like constantly shifting and changing. And we've said this a lot on this podcast, but it's really about power and influence. And I think one of the points that they didn't like about Talrico is how he said that Jesus exposes his whiteness and his desire for white people to have more power. Um, and they made fun of that, and I thought that's ironic, because I think that's the core thing. A white straight man is really what they want to have power and influence in the world, and anything that comes against that, they're against. The Iran thing is, I think they are on the side of America because Trump is, and so Trump's their sugar daddy. Um, so whatever Trump wants, they want. But the hypocrisy is crazy
Do you
because
think they
even
see that? Do you think they see that it's that way in a way that it? I don't know that it's ever been with any other politician, that truly whatever Trump wants, that's what they believe. Like, is there any transparency there that so much of the church and evangelicalism has given Trump that amount of power over their belief system?
Yeah, I can't think of one. Um,
I mean, I can't think of one who's been that way, but
yeah.
do they see it? That's the part that I'm just like, how can you not? But it's almost
I
like
don't
they
think
don't.
they don't, because I'm thinking about it. They basically said progressive liberals were only believed what they believed because they wanted to support their politicians and their politics.
Right.
Which, if they knew
There's a
anything about progressive liberal politics, they know like progressive liberals agree on nothing. So
which is why they can't ever get anyone elected.
I know.
They can't ever get anything passed or anyone elected because they can't. It's such a big tent,
Yeah.
not just in diversity of people. And I think, republicanism maybe used to be a bigger tent than it currently is in diversity. I think that's shrinking, with minorities like rats out of a burning building. I mean, the Latino voters obviously seem to be running, understandably so, from the Republican Party, but progressivism, Democrats have traditionally been a big tent, diversity wise,
Mhm.
and can't seem to agree on anything or get anything done, which used to almost be a liability in my mind, and maybe it still is a liability for having power. But also, when you see the alternative where everybody is able to work together to get something done, no matter what it is, I might almost like, oh, I don't know that I want that. I don't know that I want uniformity in any political party necessarily that I'm in. Now, having seen MAGA and Trump utilize that to deny anything that ever was conservatism to begin with, and any ethical or moral foundation if it doesn't align with whatever Trump seems to want on any given day.
Yeah. Um, yeah, there was a lot of contradictions from them, and I think it's because of that. They don't really think for themselves anymore. Um, and if you don't agree with their view of the Bible, then you're going to hell, obviously. So,
Obviously.
like, yeah, it was wild. And actually, that was interesting too, because Nasser was clearly a more progressive theologian than Howerton. And that came out when they were talking about end times theology, whereas Howerton definitely wanted to say this is Armageddon, this is a sign of the end times. And he did say that. And he quoted, Ezekiel and how this Armageddon battle is going to come to Persia, and Persia is Iran. And Nasser wouldn't bite. Nasser has more of a, he said, I have a millennial view on the end times, and I agree with that. I think, if we're talking about, it's come up a lot because, right, there's been some whistleblower reports of commanders in the army coming out and saying God is using Trump to bring in Armageddon in the end times and Jesus' return through this battle in Iran. Um, I just want to say bluntly, like, the book of Revelation was never intended to be read literally. It, and all these guys get excited. Howerton's excited, and all his compadres that Jesus is going to come back on a horse with the blood and the sword, and he's going to slaughter everybody who doesn't believe in him and win. And it's like, that's not going to happen. And the people that wrote the Bible at this time only had a view of the Middle East. Like, they had no idea about the rest of the world. Of course, they're going to write about the end times, coming to the Middle East. Like, so to use that literally, and they never meant it to be used literally, is just a failure. And it's actually, I forget who said it. I wish I could remember in the moment, but somebody recently just said, like, a famous theologian said that, like, most of this literal theology actually comes from, like, Left Behind and Tim LaHaye.
Mm-hmm.
There's not actually any real scholarly backing behind it. It was more of a pastoral, kind of fear tactic to get people to pray the prayer of salvation and get on Jesus' team so he doesn't slaughter you and you're not left behind. Um, just wild that this has come to the forefront. Although we shouldn't be surprised because, good old Pete had what's his face, Doug Wilson, in the
Yeah.
office the other day. which is crazy.
Yeah, Pete Hegseth. It's deeply steeped in a church and in a theology that is not only just openly and proudly racist, but is also, yes, very kind of end times left behind focus, which is very new, as you said, Tim LaHaye. So we're going back 20 or 30 years at the most, kind of with this dominant view of revelation, and even the idea of a rapture or revelation at all being some sort of a modern end times thing is only 100 years old, 150 years old, 200 at the most. So the church has not historically, for almost its entire life, believed what most of evangelicalism believes about revelation, which doesn't necessarily make it wrong. I mean, the church has been wrong on some issues for 1800 years, stance on Judaism, women, patriarchy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the church has been wrong and can be wrong for that period of time. But I think the biggest reason why the church is wrong on Revelation is Revelation itself. You just have to read Revelation. How do you take it literal? You can't even take a literal view of Revelation unless you're actually going to see beasts. It's even they're interpreting, what all of these signs and these symbols are, but interpreting in a way that's very violent and very, very bloodshed and very crusaderish, which dramatically goes against, not only Jesus and the rest of the line of thinking of the New Testament, but it's also very kind of anti what Jesus taught would be and would come.
Yeah. And that book was written for a particular people. John was writing, to people being persecuted by Rome. The 666 number that's become famous, was Nero. I mean, it's been kind of proven that John was writing about the Emperor Nero. You could do a numeric thing with taking that to the Hebrew, and it actually spells out Nero. He's obviously writing metaphorically for multiple reasons. One, he's telling a story, so it's easy to remember. I mean, they didn't have like these devices, that we have to easily, text and message and send out videos like this. So he's just telling a story. He's trying to encourage the church. And so then after that, when the church was deciding whether or not they wanted to put Revelation in as in the canon, the compromise they made for Revelation, and this is like, scholarly, it's really not even that debatable, was it was to be used for worship, to like know that God is king, God is going to save his people. It wasn't to be used as a literal thing. It was supposed to be
right. Yeah,
used as part of, just the worship of God.
It wasn't even supposed to be in the Bible. It was only, that's a great point, that it was the very last book added, and it was only in there because of a compromise that they essentially needed in order to get, I forget which part of the church, whether it was the Orthodox side. To be, so that's a great point. And I had not heard what the intent for it was. That's new information to me.
Yeah, I think it was the Orthodox side didn't want to include it, and the Western side, of course, wanted to include it. And the compromise was this should be only used in worship, not as like a theological text, because their fear was that it would be interpreted literally, and it shouldn't be.
They were right.
Yes,
they were right. They screwed us over. Right. Jeez, yeah. Thank you.
And so, and I love your point where you said, just read Revelation. How would you interpret this literally? Like, you might as well interpret the Lord of the Rings literally, if you're going to interpret Revelation literally. So it just like is kind of like doesn't pass the logical spell test of anything that we've experienced living as humans. So yeah, the Armageddon thing is is kind of not kind of, it's a false narrative. It's a false theology. It's a jacked theology, to use our title of our podcast here. I think there's definitely God. The point is Christ will return. Christ will bring his kingdom.
Yeah.
And my belief is he uses us as his people through our love to bring his kingdom, not through death and
Yeah.
slaughter.
Yeah, but that's
sending
not a
tomahawk missiles to children.
exactly, but that's not a compelling theology for holy war. Love and rainbows and unicorns and clouds. It's not a compelling theology whenever you want to get buy-in from your religious base for bombing Iran as a distraction, or for whatever other godforsaken reason he decided to go into Iran. We could have gone into Iran for the last 40 years. There is a reason that no previous president decided to go into Iran. All of them could have done it. All of them had the intelligence. All of them had the ability. And all of them probably had a stronger armed forces at their use than Trump has at his use, because he so decimated the leadership and brought in so many people who aren't military minded at all. Anyway, it's ridiculous. Yeah, I was having a conversation with somebody who I used to attend church with yesterday, and they're so drunk the Kool-Aid of this idea of holy war and crusade and rah destroy and blow up Iran, that they were advocating openly for ethnic cleansing and for the death of thousands and thousands of civilians, and saying this is a good thing, and I'm like, this is breaking international law. Like, it's a crime, to intentionally target civilians. And so, the person is like calling me a confused minister and telling me they're praying for my sanctification, because I'm not just because I'm not supportive of Iran, but because I'm not supporting civilians being targeted and killed. And I'm like, what the hell world am I living in this religious day and age, where we've so bought into this idea of holy war and crusade and kill anything and destroy anything that isn't Christian, no matter how innocent or useless to our ends it is.
Well, I've been seeing a lot of quotes to that end. Like, one of the saddest ones I saw was from a senator, or maybe a state senator, who said that, Muslims shouldn't have the right to live, right? That, Christians are the ones that have a right to live in America. And, that's like a devaluing of life and not caring what happens. And my concern is, I live in a very diverse area, and I have Muslim friends and Jewish friends and Christian friends and, atheist friends. And, I can't imagine my Muslim friends not being my friends and not being here. And I can see it coming, where, that post 9/11, just like discrimination and hatred towards our Muslim community. It really hasn't let up completely, but it is dissipated over the years, and I think we're headed back towards some of that evil. And I think, that's the attitude. Who cares? Like, they don't, their life isn't valuable because of their religion and their faith, which is a whole nother topic. But there's this view in actually Howerton, his conservative evangelicalism. They say this, and I think he might even said it on this podcast, but it's very popular even when I was evangelical, is like, they don't understand what love is because they don't really believe in God. And my pushback is on that is like, isn't God love? Like, don't we as Christians believe God is love? So wouldn't any act of love be God, be of God? Even if it is a Muslim person or a Hindu person or a Jewish person, someone who doesn't believe what we believe, wouldn't that be still God? I don't like, or do you not believe God is love? Like when I hear a statement like they can't possibly understand the love of God, and they have an act of love, those two things ideas don't compute to me. So the, any act that they do to serve me and my family isn't love. Like I don't understand, or isn't of God, is still evil because they're Muslim, or Jewish. Uh, it's just I don't know. I'm confused. So I think that's like the big thing is they don't think through. I think their points very logically, like to their natural end. It's just well, they're not like me, so they're bad. Um, which it comes through very strongly that anyone different than me is not good.
Yeah, no, I think that's a phenomenal distillation of a whole lot of problems on political side, on theological side. Is they're not like me, they must be bad. Which I I don't know how you comport that to anything related at all to Christ. I mean, I think that's a very easy one to look at in the New Testament and say there's nothing of Christ in a statement like they're not like me, so they must be bad. And yet, that's essentially what we hear over and over and over again out of the Trumps, the Hegseths, the Doug Wilsons, the William Wolfs. They're not like me, so they must be bad. And then trying somehow to say that this is Christianity, but they certainly can't use Christ, really, or the Bible to support that. But I don't think a large portion of people want Christ or Christianity. They want to say it to make themselves maybe assuage their own guilt and shame. But I don't sense that there's any real desire for Christ or Christianity anymore in what passes or proclaims to be Christianity these days. That's a weird place to be in.
Yeah. And they have an attitude, the leaders of this, movement. I mean, I'm fresh off listening to Howerton. Like, he has this attitude, like, I don't have to prove it to you. I don't have to even show you, but just believe me,
Yeah. White privileged asshole attitude. That's what that is, right? Yeah. I can say it and therefore it is true. And I'm insulated enough where I can believe that.
Yeah. And the other thing fascinating is, he's a complete racist. I mean, his crew are complete racists. They were making racist jokes constantly throughout. And anytime, they're doing, they're appropriating accents and language and different words and making fun of. And I thought for a minute that maybe there was like a token brown person in the room. And then I was listening and I pulled up the video and I was like, nope, there's not.
Really? Yeah. It's so sad and surprising too. I mean, because I know Howerton's church. I have connections in Howerton's church from when I lived in Dallas. It used to be a pretty phenomenal, well-loved, and kind of model church for not necessarily progressive theology or anything, but definitely forward thinking in church ministry. It wasn't, a deeply rooted fundamentalist, Southern Baptist church. It was very kind of forward thinking, but Howerton has come in and become himself and turned it into something that is not only not reflective of Christianity of Christ, as we've said, but is like a state church in Nazi 1930s Germany in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Where its only real point seems to be not transformation, of the soul, to something that is reflective of Christ or anything of Scripture, but is to simply be a mouthpiece for the regime.
Yeah, he's become what Joe Weeben dreamed of becoming. I think I, I look out at my feeds and what some of my conservative evangelical friends are watching and consuming, and it's him. I mean,
Yeah.
he's become the Mark Driscoll, Matt Chandler of this era, for a lot of folks, that they listen to him and they worship him,
People are going to hate
and
this
so
comparison, but he's becoming the Billy Graham of
yeah,
an
yeah,
entire movement within Christianity, where Billy Graham was kind of the face child of a more compassionate kind of, not progressive, but more progressive conservatism. Um,
yeah,
as he became kind of the model for this compassionate conservatism and leader, and Howerton is kind of becoming the Billy Graham of this sect of Christian nationalism.
yeah.
Though not as willing as Billy Graham, I think probably to work across lines. That clearly is not in Howerton's thing. But as far as prominence, I think you're right that Howerton is on the cusp of maybe becoming the guy, for the clergy on that side.
Yeah. I mean,
and he's an idiot, which I guess is kind of right. Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask earlier, does Howerton even have a degree? I assume Howerton is a graduate from somewhere. Obviously he's straight. I could probably look it up, but I don't think he would have gotten hired by that church had he not had an MDiv from somewhere. But I mean, Howerton, which I guess is part of the reason why he's well loved, is he really comes across as being an everyday kind of man, but also a fool, also kind of an idiot. He is the anti MacArthur in a lot of ways. MacArthur, who didn't really have an education, but wanted to come across as being educated and being smart, doesn't necessarily really seem to be Howerton's goal or shtick or an ability that he has. He's kind of at, and I think I can't think of anybody who is smart or wise or comes across as being well educated in Christian nationalism. Weeben certainly doesn't. Neither. Stephen Wolf, I guess, kind of does, but they sideline him because of his academics. It's really a liability for him in most of his conversations. That, Doug Wilson isn't. The absence of expertise and wisdom seems to be a necessary thing for gaining prominence there. We want you to be dumb.
Yeah, he alluded to that Tallarico connects well with people who are educated in the faith. And so we need to talk to our educated family members, Christians, about how evil he is, which it perked me. I was like, whoa, okay. Yeah, he speaks simply. He speaks, his audience is to the more uneducated theologically. And he is well spoken, which is why he has an audience. He does the Rick Warren alliterations, and he's got his phrases he repeats that he thinks is so cool, and puts them on T-shirts, and people buy them, and and then spouts off these untruths, and he'll even he was trying to explain why Jesus never really claimed he was God, because I think he was kind of referring to Dan McClellan. He he comes really hard on Howerton, but I think he was responding to one of his videos today. He didn't mention him by name, but he was talking about why Jesus never really refers to himself as God, and he said, "Well, Jesus winks at you. He says this, and then he winks. So that wink means that he was telling us that he was God." I'm like, okay, first of all, where does Jesus wink? how did you get that from that? I was just like, oh my gosh. But like, I'm thinking about someone who like hasn't read the text, doesn't know the text. They're hearing Howerton talk, and he's talking, very smoothly and slyly, and oh yeah, Jesus winks at us. That's him telling us that he was God. I could totally see somebody, telling their friend that, see, he winks here at us. Howerton said that. I'm like, wow, so.
This is another reason why I think that there is some wisdom and brilliance in the Catholic setup where, you know, guys like Howerton would not be out on their own. There would be some authority structure
Yeah.
to handle and manage these idiots. And I mean that in the true sense of the word. These people
Well,
who are
yeah,
ignorant.
that hierarchy structure, yeah, helps put down this like watered down, really conservative political way of doing church. The accountability structure in any hierarchical structure will
Yeah.
prevent this from happening.
Which, I mean, don't get me wrong. I am aware there are issues, with every ecclesiology, church governance setup. There are probably certainly many in the Catholic system that I don't even know that are problematic or liabilities, but this is not one of them. This is one of the things that I think, in these moments, having some authority structure or above is problematic, that it's
Yeah,
not
I mean,
there for guys like Howerton. And even in the Catholic Church, obviously Pope Francis has probably been more politically involved than the Catholic Church has probably historically been, and at least recently, and a lot of Catholics are comfortable with. And Pope Leo, has similarly, made some very bold, I think, statements that were probably uncomfortable or abrasive. But I think, in generally, I don't think that the Catholic Church, even when Pope Francis and Pope Leo have gone there, it's been very limited. It's been very direct. It's been very kind of succinct. But I think in general, the Catholic Church is still about the Catholic Church's mission, and it's not necessarily to be a political advocacy, group for anything, but it's to be about the business of transforming and shaping people into Christ. And, unfortunately, I don't think that we necessarily have that in evangelicalism or in American Christianity anywhere, probably even on our best days. I don't think Protestantism is necessarily there. Right now, I think it's steeped in politics everywhere in a way that I'm not sure that Catholicism necessarily mirrors right now, to its health and to Protestants' detriment.
yeah, I completely agree. I think, I mean, the conservative evangelicalism I grew up in, we really never taught people how to live like Christ or to love our neighbor or even to love God. It was a very much like proving that God existed and that Jesus existed and that he actually died and that he actually rose from the dead and that, he was who he says he is. So we better pray the prayer or we're going to go to hell. And then we must live this way, which the way we were called to live was definitely not necessarily a Christian way. It was a American conservative values way to live. Um, and we were never really taught like to love the poor because that was a liberal progressive thing. But Christ is clear in the scriptures to love the poor, and Pope Leo rightfully is taking stands in that regard, is taking care of the poor, welcoming the stranger,
Yeah.
taking care of the immigrant. But also Pope Leo, like he's kind of an enigma to the progressive because he's like, let's not, have abortions. Let's close down abortion clinics. And so in that sense, like, he is like a conservative politically. And to me, someone like that tells me that they're trying to interpret who Christ was and the scripture was over and above some political system, you know? And I respect and value that. And that's what I try to do and how I try to be. But I
Yeah,
can't respect
I
some.
give, yeah, absolutely. I give a
Go ahead.
lot of deference for disagreement when I sense that the individual, even though we might disagree vehemently on a topic, when I am able to seemingly discern that their stance is truly kind of rooted in trying to be authentic and following the way of Christ rather than the way of a political system that told them that that was what the way of Christ was. I
Yeah.
agree with that. I have a lot of respect, for Pope Leo because of the ways in which he has modeled Christ in very volatile, conversations and situations. It gives me a lot of freedom to be able to give a lot of grace and mercy in those areas where we disagree, maybe perhaps in abortion or in LGBTQ issues.
Although I think he's coming around on the LGBTQ stuff.
But
He's made
I
some.
think you point out a really good point though that I've been noticing on online, especially whenever somebody, if you were to go on Facebook or Twitter or somewhere online and you were to say, tell me what it means to be a Christian, how do you know whether or not somebody is a Christian? I think, a lot of folks, especially within evangelicalism or conservatism, would define Christianity by where you stand, maybe not on where you vote, but where you stand on social issues, like LGBTQ,
Yeah.
abortion, borders. In fact, I saw somebody, on my wall yesterday post a list of 6 things, or 7 things that were necessary for one being a Christian. These were the linchpins of Christianity. It was open borders or closed borders.
Yeah.
This list of that's essentially a MAGA platform. And I was like, please point to any creed whatsoever throughout history that would list any one of those tacitly. And I think that, what you said earlier about foundation, that we never really we taught beliefs rather than practicing a way of living. And the beliefs that we ended up teaching over the last 30 or 40 years in evangelicalism were beliefs that weren't Christian beliefs, but were Republican beliefs that sounded Christian. And so now, whenever you ask any given evangelical or Republican or conservative, what are the linchpin things for being a Christian, they're not going to say things like belief in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. They're not going to say things like love God, love others. They're not going to say things like, do justice, give mercy, walk humbly. They're not going to even probably say things like give your heart to Christ. They're not going to say things like become saved, by even things that are traditionally maybe not necessarily creedal, but are inherently, embedded in evangelicalism or Protestantism. They're not even going to give those list of things. They're not going to list
Yeah.
anything, that has historically or biblically defined somebody as being Christian. They're going to say, do they support the gay agenda? Are they pro-abort? Where do they stand on open borders, or closed borders, or the immigrant? Where, how do they vote? These are the things that in people's minds, even if they aren't explicitly stating them, and many would, these are the things though that are driving whether or not people now today say you're in the kingdom or out of the kingdom. And I don't even know what to do with that. Like, where do you go from there with an entire generation or more of people who fundamentally don't understand what it means to follow Christ or to be a Christian at all? They wouldn't even get one of the things on the list. Right.
Yeah. No, it's so true. I think it's what you're saying, especially conservative. You believe Jesus literally died and rose again, and it's not like you believe Jesus died and rose again, and then we can debate about the rest of it. No, it. There's a long list of ands, right? And to me, it was what does Christ tell us? All the law and prophets are summed up in love God and love others. He doesn't say pray a prayer, believe this about me. He says love me, love others. Like to me, the filter is in all of that. Are you loving others? And then that's what I preached to our church here, a few weeks ago or a month or so ago when the folks were dying in Minneapolis by the hands of ICE. Is like, look, we can disagree on like immigration policy and in all of that and how to deport people or not to deport people, but like if we don't start with our love of neighbor and can't agree on that, then like we're not Christian. Like we're not following the way of Christ here. Like so we have to like be about like love of neighbor. We should all say no one should die or be harmed in whatever political policy is enacted. And if we can agree on that, then we can like then go to the next layer down and say, okay, let's talk about like how open do the borders be and like nuance our our discussions and how that plays out, but it should never be at the harm of our neighbor. And I think we've lost that because yeah, we've like you just said, we've put our political system in those preferences above
Yeah.
God,
Well,
above who Christ is.
what you said there though, like struck me. We want people to die,
Mm,
though. We we
yeah.
we we do. There is a bloodlust
Mm,
within America in general, but within conservatism, I would say, but evangelical conservatism, especially, there's a real bloodlust there where we want violence, we want death. And I've talked about this a lot in regard to penal substitutionary atonement, to this idea that God punishes, his son and takes out his wrath on it, yada, yada, yada. Wherever it came from, I don't know. Maybe it came from multiple places, but there's this real desire for vengeance being mine rather than being the Lord's. There's this real desire now that is intertwined into Christianity for pain, for violence, for somebody to be hurt, for there to be death, which is, I think, why there's so much support in a certain segment of people for death and harm to people in Iran, just simply because they might have gathered and said death to Israel and death to America. Does that mean you kill somebody just because they said they wanted you dead? Like, does that give you the right to to take out vengeance on, like what Jesus said, die to self? If anybody's supposed to die here, it's supposed to be you. The whole of your Christian theology is built on you being the one who dies, not other people being the one who die. So I just, again, WTF, where's your theology coming from? It's not coming from the Bible. It's not coming from Jesus. I don't know how you don't know that or see that. You certainly weren't taught that. So you've made up something now, believed it as being true, and then pretended as though it's historic Christianity for 2,000 years and that there's no other option. And anybody who disagrees with you is not only wrong, but is anathema, is unsaved, is. I, I
yeah.
don't know how we got here, but I certainly don't know where we go from here. Other than an ethnic cleansing of Christians here in the U.S.,
Yeah.
like flood the nation. Choose 8 of us who aren't that way and start over. Like I don't know what you do here. Let's build an ark.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Let's just start
I
over.
think I think it's laziness. It's a lack of wanting to interact with somebody who's different than you. So it's just easier just to wish
Mm.
them gone. Um, and and they say this too. Like I remember I used to say it. I don't say it anymore, but it's kind of core to the penal substitutionary atonement, where there is no good person. You know, there was one and he
So
died.
let's be as
That
bad
whole
as we
thing.
can. Yeah.
Yeah. So like they're all bad anyways, so it's okay. They all deserve death. I even deserve death. It's kind of their way of justifying it. Like I'm bad too, and I deserve to die. But Jesus has saved me. And so when we change that and we look at people as basically good, then we have to actually love them and care for them. And I think that shift is big. And so it's
Yeah, that
just
was a real
easier.
revolutionary idea for me. Like when I got involved in the Quaker congregation back, a decade and a half ago, Quakers, one of their primary central core values and beliefs from George Fox is that the light of God is in everyone. And George Fox, was contemporary of Calvin and Luther, et cetera, et cetera. But he was essentially considered anathema from those churches because several things, but primarily because of his thought that total depravity wasn't true. That there is this light, there's this peace of God, Imago Dei, that resides in every single human, and that changes the way that we view other people, no matter how awful they may be in their thinking or in their belief or in their actions. There's something of God still embedded in there. There's still a light that can spark and that can grow. And I think what you were saying there was exactly right, is that we have lost this idea of the humanity or the Imago Dei or the light being in other people. And if we would stop for a minute and reconsider that our neighbor on their worst day, is still loved by God as much or more than we are on our best day, it changes the way I think about the Ayatollah. It changes the way I think about Netanyahu. It changes the way that I think about Joel Wieben. Maybe not a lot, but at least enough to be able to say, I don't have the right or the privilege of condemning you any more than I have the right of condoning you, but I certainly don't have a right to capital punish you. It's not within my purview, and I have to step back and recognize that God still resides in you because you draw breath. And the violence and the hate and the anger and this bloodlust that we have, is maddening, but penal substitutionary atonement doesn't really take that into account. And I think we've ended up with a lot of not just bad theology, but now we've ended up with a lot of bad practice and belief everywhere, because we started with this idea that everybody was totally depraved. And so I can act in a way that's totally depraved and grace will forgive me, but to hell with you.
Yeah. And to hell with you because you're depraved. Like you're evil, so you deserve it. So it's fine. And so
So
that I
let's just
think
get there
that's why.
sooner.
Yeah, I think that's why it's fine to blow up a school full of children. I mean, they honestly don't really care about that. Let's be honest. No one's up in
No.
arms about that. So I
No,
think,
well,
yeah,
and because it's not in their backyard either. Like they've never had to pull their kids from the rubble.
yeah,
It's like a video game. It's there and out of sight, and they can turn it off or turn it on depending on what.
yeah, and it's the government. It's the government that of Iran that was oppressing people, and it's not. It wasn't the people, right? It's the. And I think we get that confused in this war. I mean,
We're not
I'm not
liberating
gonna.
people.
No,
We're not liberating people. We're not helping them. Somebody said, we're bringing them into the 21st century AD. When they're living in the first century AD. A guy said to me yesterday, I'm like, have you been to Iran? Do you know anybody who lives in Iran? Have you ever seen pictures of Tehran? They're not living in 1 AD. You're living
yeah,
in 1 AD. They're not
yeah,
living in 1 AD. And you're not helping them by doing any of these things. First, we had the nuclear thing controlled, so that's not a win. You're not helping release them from oppression. The reason why we didn't go into Iran for the last 4 decades is because we knew what would happen there. It's the same thing that happens in every other place where we try to free them. What comes in afterwards is worse than what we freed them from, which is exactly what happened here. You know,
Yeah,
the
like,
new Ayatollah Khomeini is worse than the one whom we killed. So
I know.
I just, y'all are effing idiots. Turn off Fox News.
Yeah.
No, nobody supports the government of Iran or what they're doing, but America, when it gets involved, only makes it worse.
Well, and it's colonialism at its finest. Like, we're really there to try to make them a democracy, which they're never going to be. It's just it hasn't worked in the Middle East at all. It's not going to work there.
And they're kicking our asses, and I think it's awesome. Actually, I do. I hate to say it. I'll be waving my flag on the 4th of July, but I hope Iran kicks America's ass. I think we deserve it.
It's
I think what we have done there is unconscionable. It's for the wrong reasons. It's going to end up backfiring on all of us, and we're all going to pay a steep price for it around the world.
Yeah.
We went in like gunslinging Western sheriffs in a 30-minute John Wayne TV show, and
well, they were obviously very well prepared for this.
they had 40 years to prepare for it. They knew it was coming.
And and they have Russia on their side and helping them and all these things.
I think they have the world on their side. Like, let's just be honest. Like, whenever people side with the Iranians and help the Iranians over the U.S., that's not a commentary on Iran and how good Iran is. That's a commentary on America's how we are viewed around the world.
That's just it. Like, Trump runs off all our allies and then goes to war with Iran. And they're not getting any help from our allies for good reason, right? Like,
Greenland ain't helping. Canada ain't helping.
It's wild.
It's literal insanity.
It's and I have family member. I have my sister's on the boat right outside Iran. My brother, is in the military in that region. So it affects me personally, and it pisses me off because I feel like they're just there to cover up a billionaire's pedophilia, to be honest with you. I don't think he would have went into Iran if Epstein files weren't damning to him, and his market, his tariffs didn't work. So the next best thing is to distract by going to war with Iran. And we all know eventually war makes money. Even if we lose, it doesn't matter. It'll make money for our government. And it's historically been proven in every war. We make a lot of money, and it's at the sacrifice of our soldiers, our 19 and 20-year-old soldiers. You look at the ship my sister's on, and it's like, I think 80% of it's under 25. So it's our young people we're sending over. And while our billionaires are on the golf course, doing whatever the heck they want. So that pisses me off. And I think it should piss everybody off. It should piss off Josh Howerton. It should piss off people like him, that our government is doing this and no accountability.
Yeah. I think that's it. Even if you agree that Iran should have been invaded, even if you are a Trump or a MAGA voter, which probably none of those people are watching still at this point, but let's say you're pro-Trump, let's say you're pro-MAGA, let's say you're pro, invading, whatever. I think it can be said that the cavalier and half-assed way that Trump and our government have handled this and managed this is an embarrassment to all of us and is a liability to the people, like you said, like your family, to people who we love, need, and support, our troops, those people who are in the Middle East, ambassadors, and et cetera, on our behalf, expats, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We should be above this kind of behavior, not saying invading Iran, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're better than this. Whenever we do something on the, or we should be, whenever we do something on the international scene, whenever we're involved in international politics, or destabilizing international governments, or going into countries, or pushing the button that sends, bombs or drones. What we did with the ship, the Iranian ship in India that was unarmed and then refused to offer assistance. Like, we're better than this, but maybe we're not. And if we're not better than this, I think we have to look ourselves in the mirror and say, why aren't we better than this? And if we are better than this, I think we've got to say, what do we have to do to get back to being better than this? Because this is not the America. This is not the way that I think any of us on any side of the aisle truly deeply believe that we should be behaving. And I think if we can step back, and I've actually, to their credit, seen a lot of Republican and even MAGA influencers doing this over the last week or two. And it's appreciated. I think whenever I see folks step back and say, I was wrong, or I didn't expect this, or I may still support him, but I can't support this. This isn't the way we do things. This shouldn't be us. I think they're right.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of folks have backed away. One of the big reasons he got a lot of votes, moderate, independent votes, is because he said no new wars. We're not going to invade or, attack and all. And people are like, I was duped. So I think, yeah, I hope he gets egg on his face, and I hope in the meantime our troops survive by and large, that there's a minimal damage because of his idiocy, but I do hope he gets egg on his face for sure. And I think he kind of is. I think it's, with people coming out against him, he hates that.
Yeah.
And
I mean, that's going to save lives. Frankly, that's going to save lives. That's going to save money. That's going to save the risk of danger for us, for Iran, for the rest of the world. The more egg Trump gets on his face, the sooner, the better, because that will hopefully encourage us to extricate as much as is possible, diminish, move along, rather than continuing to double down on something that's not winnable and will require a tremendous amount of resources, most importantly, human lives, to continue to maintain.
Which they basically said that the draft isn't off the table. So like it's wild. Like, he's telling us in the election cycle that if we vote for Kamala, she's going to, employ the draft. And then here he is basically hinting that he's going to employ the draft if they have to.
Yeah, it's definitely floating that trial balloon. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Pretty bold, pretty ballsy of a draft dodger.
Yeah, I know. There's just so much wrong with it. And so, yeah, it's
cavalier. It's who Trump is. And I think everybody on all sides should be able to say that this is who Trump is. And it's part of the reason why he's loved by MAGA, is that he is cavalier and he is a maverick, and that he does what he wants, no matter how insane it is. There's a bit of a love and a joy and a pleasure, that's gotten from that. But I don't think that war and American lives is the place to do that or support that kind of mentality.
No. No. Um, so yeah, a lot more we could say, but I gotta go pick up my kid.
Yeah,
So
so we're not we're probably not headed to an Armageddon, but you know, we might be headed to the end of the world. Who knows?
yeah, this is not from Revelation. I'll say
All right.
that.
Well, it was good to talk to you this week, man.
Yeah. Do you want to do a
I
little
mean, we can.
fitness?
Do you have the time?
Yeah, I have a couple minutes we could do.
All right. We'll do it. Let's do it fast. All right, so we'll do the after the show part quickly. It's been a while. It's been a long while. I don't know how long it's been. 6 months, a
Yeah,
year.
before the holidays. I can't remember the last one, but yeah, I think we were heading into Thanksgiving or something.
Well, it's
But
okay. So it's not been that long. It's not been that long ago. I was like, has it been a year? Yeah. So
no.
fitness journey. How are things?
Right now is the CrossFit Open at our gym, which is the yearly 3 week workouts we do as a CrossFit community. So that's been a lot of fun to challenge myself in the gym and do things I haven't done in a while. Like I retired from box jumps, so I did some box jumps, and I was happy I didn't crash and burn. And then I did some chest to bar, so I was happy about that. Um, so yeah, I've been feeling good. I got I got back on the diet train over the last since the Open started. Um, I was definitely off the wagon once we hit like the week before Christmas, and then into into the new year. So I was enjoying the winter bulking and snow days and all those things. And I had no desire not to. You know what I mean? Like I was like, I don't even care right now. I am eating a bag of Doritos and I don't give two shits.
I think sometimes you just need a break, right? You need a few weeks,
Yeah.
you need a few months to just kind of
Yeah.
be off. That way you can
But
purge yourself. You can go back on.
yeah, but once the Open started up, I said, you know what? I'll get back on the wagon. So I'm back on the wagon a little bit and feeling good about that. I'm feeling good. So
Yeah, box jumps gave me a bit of a jump scare whenever you said that. I had like trauma get triggered. I have several physical wounds on my body that will permanent scars because of those boxes and box jumps. You don't want to miss a jump on a box jump. It's
yeah,
not a
same.
it's not a pretty thing. Yeah,
That's why I retired.
that's actually probably pretty smart. I I've been doing well, you know, since surgeries and heart and stuff like that. Definitely back to normal, though always like a little scared, you know, like when's the plumbing going to fail? But I've been doing so well. I had lost a good amount of weight, gotten down to a good point, and then about a month ago, yeah, Girl Scout cookies hit, and I fell off the wagon and was like eating a box or a package of cookies like every single day. So I think I put on like 15 pounds in the space of like 3 weeks from bad habits. So I'm back on. You know, it's you know, it's a rhythm, right? You get back on the horse every time you fall off. So hopefully when we do this again in a week or so, hopefully I will have been as committed as you have been.
The Open really helped me because if you look at my sign-ins at the gym too, it was very low for about 6 weeks. But
yeah, you've been doing great though. You've made a huge change over the last few months. So very proud of you.
Thanks, buddy.
Well, all right, see you next week.
Good to be back. Take it easy.
Take care.